that when we say Ik Onkar, there is one God, we haven't even scratched the surface. We don't even begin to describe what this Ik Onkar is actually talking about. If you want to find Ik Onkar, you can't go and sit in a forest somewhere. You just go sit within your own cave, go within yourself, and then you will find Onkar. We began by looking at the Mool Mantar, and the first word within the Mool Mantar, the first expression is expressed as a number, and that's the number 1. And we went into detail about what Guru Nanak Dev Ji is trying to convey with this number. That all that exists is one. Not that there is one God or that there is something external from you, but all that exists is one. There is only one thing that's present. Next, we move on to Oankaar. So, Ik is the first letter here, or the first digit here. The question that I will ask you is, how do we know that this should be pronounced Onkar? If we look at the spelling, it should just say Ik, O. Where does Onkar, where does that word Onkar come from? Because the word Onkar isn't spelled here. So that's the first thing for us to think about. Bhai Gurdas Ji talks about this in his Vara. One of the Vars, number 39, he talks about the meaning of Ik Onkar. And there he writes, Ekankar ekang lik Uda Oankar likhaya. So, Bhai Gurdas Ji is saying that there are 2 symbols here. The first one, Ekang, Ik, represents something called Ekankar. Ekankar ekangalik. So with writing the number 1, Ekankar is being expressed. Uda Oankar likhaya. So Bhai Gurdas Ji is almost as authentic a historian as we can get, because he lived at the time of the Gurus. So even at the time of the Gurus, we know that there is no doubt that this should be pronounced Ik Onkar, because the Uda represents Onkar. But Bhai Gurdas Ji introduces a new concept to us, which is Ekankar. Now in Bani you will hear Ekankar, and you might assume that Ekankar is the same as Oankar, or it's a different way of saying Ik Oankar. So is there a difference between Ekankar and Oankar? Guru Nanak Dev Ji talks about this. There's a Shabad Bilawal Mahla Pehla. So it's on Ang 838. So Guruji talks there, Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, Ekam Ekankar Nirala. There is one unique form, Nirala. Ekankar Nirala. Amar Ajoni Jat Najala. And that this one thing is Amar, undying, Ajoni, unborn, Jat Najala. It has no caste, no discrimination, and Jala, no entrapments. It belongs to nothing. It's bound to nothing. Agam Agochar Roop Narekhya. It is Agam. It's unreachable. Agochar, unfathomable with our mind. Roop Narekhya. It has no form. It has no features. Khojit Khojit Ghat Ghat Dekhya. Searching and searching, I have found that within every heart. So Guru Nanak Dev Ji gives us the definition of what does Ekankar mean. So Ekankar, we can say, is the Nirgun Sarup. Nirgun and Sargun are 2 words that you come across quite often. Nirgun means no values, no attributes. Yeah, you might talk about someone as having lots of gun. You can talk about someone having lots of agun, bad values. Guru Nanak Dev Ji says that Ekankar is the formless roop of the oneness. Agam gochar roop na rekhya. It has no form. It has nothing tangible. So here, Guruji is saying that ekankar is about something intangible. So by that you can start seeing now what Oankar must mean. So the ekankar is the formless, and Guruji says, where do I find that formless? Khojat ghat ghat dekhya. When I was searching for it, I found it within each and every heart. Within each and every one of us is the formless. So we always identify with our form. Yeah? When we look in the mirror, we say, yeah, that's me. So we can only identify with that. But Guru Nanak is saying that within you, there's something that's formless. So within each and every one of you, there's one thing. It's not that you have your own formless being and you have your own formless being. It's that there's one being that's inside all of us. Khojat. When I was searching, I found it within my heart and within your heart, within everyone. So that's the definition of ekankar. So there's actually a word called ekankar, which is unique and different to Oankar. So then what does Oankar mean? There's a Shabad in Guru Granth Sahib Ji, again written by Guru Nanak Dev Ji, where the name of the Shabad is Oankar. There Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, Prabh nede har dur na jano. That oneness that you're looking for is very near to you. Don't think that it's far away. Eko srisht sabai. There is this oneness that permeates all of Srishti. All of creation actually has this one thing that's at the heart of it all. Prabh nede har dur na jano. So Guruji time and time again tells us, where do we go looking for this thing? Yeah? And this is why we do the practice as well. Don't think that this thing called God, and we talked about it last time, that there's some external character called God. Guruji is saying, Prabh nede, it's very near to you. In fact, it's nearer to you than you know. Ekankar avar nahi duja, Nanak ek samai. Guru Nanak saying that there is only this ekankar everywhere. Avar nahi duja, there is no other. So within you, everyone, there is actually not you, and it's not you, and it's not you. It's actually something behind you, something deeper within you. And within everyone, and within every animal, and every plant, and every molecule, there is this oneness. Avar nahi duja, there's no other. So you are the same as you, and you are the same as you. Everyone is actually just one being. So we're still covering this ik concept, yeah? We haven't even gone on to Onkar yet. This is Guru Nanak Dev Ji just describing, trying to get us to understand what is this ik. Nanak ek samai. Nanak says that this oneness is in everything. It's merged within everything. So, a question here, we like to talk about Guru Nanak Dev Ji and Sikhi being quite unique and modern, and Guru Nanak came to the world and spread this message. But let's just explore this idea. Is the idea of ik something that's unique to Sikhi? Even prior to Guru Nanak Dev Ji's time, the idea that there is one God, what we might call monotheism, was actually being spread already by one of the main religions of the time, which was Islam. You even hear nowadays that Islam is a monotheistic religion. So, is Guru Nanak Dev Ji talking about the same theory, the same concept here? From some of the descriptions we've seen so far, khojat, ghat, ghat, dekhiya, that it's within every heart. Ekankar, avar nahi duja, Nanak ek samai. Nanak says that this thing is everywhere. It actually starts differentiating itself from the monotheistic religion. So let's go a little bit into monotheism. What does monotheism mean? The word monotheism means that there is one God which is the creator of everything, and it's generally seen as an anthropomorphic figure. What do I mean by anthropomorphic? Anthropomorphic means a human-like figure. We talked about this last time. When we talk about God, the very mention of the word God conjures up an image of some human-like figure, Mr. God. Yeah? Some kind of old man with a white beard in the sky. So when we talk about monotheism, we're talking about almost a caricature that's human-like. In the Abrahamic religions, you talk about God getting angry. God is a vengeful God, wrathful God. Yeah? Gets angry, takes revenge on his children for doing wrong deeds. Yeah? This is monotheism, where there is some God and he is somehow a father figure. Yeah? Some sort of authority figure, male. Yeah? And we are the subservient children of this God. Guru Nanak Dev Ji is not talking about this at all. Because Guru Nanak Dev Ji is saying that whatever I'm talking about, it's inside us and it's in everything. So it's not external to us in any way. So actually we can now start seeing that we're not a monotheistic religion. And all the dictionary translations, all the encyclopedias that you look up Sikhism, they'll say Sikhism is a monotheistic religion. Yeah? But we have to go back and look at what does monotheism mean and do we subscribe to that? Does Guru Nanak Dev Ji subscribe to that view? So on one hand you had the prevalent tradition of Islam and they're preaching monotheism. And on the other hand you have the other tradition in India which is Hindu tradition, and they're preaching Om. And Om is a bit closer to what we're talking about, which is about this subtle vibrational experience of oneness that's everywhere. In English, you might call that pantheism. Pantheism is the theory that God and the universe are intertwined, that there's no difference between God and the universe. God is the same as the universe, but God isn't independent from the universe in any way. It's not separate from the universe in any way. Now, what Guru Nanak Dev Ji is doing here is he's taken two different ideas here. And this is now where you start seeing people who don't know anything about Sikhi say that Guru Nanak Dev Ji borrows concepts from Islam and he borrows concepts from Hinduism and he just made a new religion. But Guru Nanak Dev Ji wasn't interested in borrowing anything. Guru Nanak Dev Ji experienced the oneness in its wholeness and then brought it to the world and said, this is the true picture. He said, Islam, you're only looking at one side of the coin. He said, Hinduism, you're only looking at the other half of the coin. Guru Nanak Dev Ji is bringing two concepts together and saying, if you want to know the whole package, you have to see monotheism, pantheism, all as one thing. So Guru Nanak Dev Ji isn't just borrowing concepts, he's actually clarifying concepts. He's making clarity for people who've been only looking at it from one way or the other. And in English, the term that we might refer to this is called panentheism. So we're introducing a lot of new different concepts here. Monotheism is something that we've heard. Pantheism is the opposite of monotheism. The one that merges both of those concepts together is called panentheism. Now, this isn't about us learning these words, but it's about us understanding that when somebody defines us as a monotheistic religion, we can't sit back and just accept that and say, yes, we're a monotheistic religion. Because what we're doing is we're taking somebody else's concepts and we're saying, yep, you can define me according to that. But Guru Nanak Dev Ji defines what Sikhi is. We don't need somebody else's labels to say, yeah, we're monotheistic, no, we're pantheistic. So this is a unifying message. Look at the two different traditions of the time, two very different concepts about what God is. Guru Nanak Dev Ji comes and he actually brings all of these things together. So he's not separating different cultures. He's bringing everyone together under this one umbrella definition of what God is. It's not trying to negate the Islamic view. It's not trying to negate the Hindu view. It's trying to actually bring a more complete definition together. So let's go a little bit into the spelling, yeah, of why this is spelt in this way. And as we go on through the Japji Sahib course and through Mool Mantar, we'll go through why there's different spellings of different words as well. That becomes very key when you want to start reading Gurbani, when you want to start translating Gurbani. When you know some of the spelling rules, you will see where other people have made translation mistakes because they've not followed these translation rules. Yeah? There's a whole science within Gurbani which is called Gurbani grammar. You know how a lot of the time you go to a lot of gurdwares, Sikh study circles, and they all say you have to learn Santhya. Yeah, Santhya is the pronunciation, the correct pronunciation. But there's a whole other science within Sikhi that's called Vyakaran. That's grammar. That's where you learn to read how Gurbani has spelt certain words in certain ways. And as we go on through the Mool Mantar, at least, we'll go through some of the spellings of why these are spelt a certain way. When they're spelt a certain way, what do they mean? What don't they mean? Yeah. So it's really important, as well as the theory, that we actually learn some of the spelling behind it so that we can go away and we can say, right, now I know how to translate these things. So let's look at the spelling of Oankaar.
A recent study has shown that over 75% of Sikhs say that their life feels stressful or overwhelming. These feelings can develop into depression, alcohol abuse, or even suicide. We believe that Guru Nanak's wisdom can help transform people's lives. Nanak Naam relies on your donation to help create more videos and podcasts like this, to educate people all over the world on how to use Guru Nanak's teachings to improve their emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. Set up a monthly donation today and help change someone's life. Visit nanaknaam.org/donate.
Some of you will be familiar with the Punjabi language, but what you may not know is that within the Punjabi language, there's only one letter that has two different ways of writing it, and that's Ura. In Punjabi, you have two different ways that you can write Ura. Yeah? And you'll see this in Guru Granth Sahib. Yeah? It's not so common within Punjabi language, if you're reading a Punjabi newspaper or something. But certainly within Guru Granth Sahib, Ura is the only letter in the alphabet that actually has two different spellings. And there's a reason for that, because they're actually two different sounds. Yeah? So, let's take Kakka as an example. Yeah? What this is doing here is that this is the sound O. This is the sound U. There's two different sounds here. And I'll give you the example with Kakka. With Kakka, we would add a hora. That would make the sound Ko. Yeah? But because this particular letter has this extension above the top, it can't have a vowel put on top of it. You can never see this. You can never put a hora on top of this letter. So because of that, this letter has two different ways that it can be spelled. So an open-ended Ura is making the sound that you would get with a hora, which is a vowel. Yeah? A closed one is making U, which is the same as Kakka with an Onkar. So in our particular alphabet, we cannot put a hora on top of this. Yeah? That same rule doesn't apply to other Indian languages. In Hindi, for example, how you would write this letter would be like this. This is your hora, a whole separate letter. Whereas here in Punjabi, we just don't have the space to put that hora, which is why we have the two different spellings. So this should always be pronounced O. And this is pronounced U. This is far more common in Gurbani. And it always has an Onkar underneath it. So, O, U. So if you find any words in Gurbani that start with this, it's an O sound. Any words that start with this, it's an U sound. If this word appears on its own, if this letter appears on its own, with no other words or letters after it, then it's pronounced Ong. These are just some of the rules that we have to learn. This letter on its own, with no other letters after it, is pronounced Ong. So now you can see how we're starting to get Oankar. So Oankar is not with this closed Ura, it's with an open Ura. I think in Sikhi we quite like to romanticize that everything is divine, that Guru Nanak Dev Ji came and he just created this whole alphabet just out of thin air. Yeah? But that's not actually true. Language has always been something that's evolved from previous languages. Yeah? So we can start seeing that there are patterns in other languages where we can see, okay, maybe he's borrowed something from here. And the reason is because people are already using languages. This is why Guru Nanak Dev Ji doesn't write his Bani in a completely foreign language. He uses the languages of the people. There's Hindi, there's Punjabi, there's a whole bunch of different languages that are there, but they're common languages that people use. And in the same way, the alphabet is also just a further extension of how Punjabi was developing at the time. To give you an example, in Gujarati, the first letter of their alphabet is that. Makes the same sound. That's the first letter of the Gujarati alphabet. You can go and look that up yourselves. So there are lots of similarities between our languages, our words, what Guru Nanak Dev Ji saw was being used at the time, what was the most appropriate language to present this message. So we're familiar with this. We understand that it's an O sound, not a U sound. On its own, it makes Oang. So then, how do we take something from Oang to mean Oankar? Now, remember I posed this question in the beginning. Why does Ik Oankar get pronounced Oankar? Why isn't it just pronounced Ik O? The reason it's not pronounced Ik O is because it's not spelled like that. It has what we call Kar. So as well as Ik, as well as O, there is something called Kar. And Kar, again, is something that's used in language prior to Gurmukhi. Kar is what we would call a suffix in English, yeah? So in English, you might have prefix, something that belongs before a word. Suffix is something that comes after a word. In Sanskrit, we have a suffix, which is Kar. And in Sanskrit, that any word that you add Kar to the end of, it means whatever the meaning of that word is, continued. Yeah? Endless, continuous. So where do we see examples of this in Gurbani? Hukmi hovan aakar. Aakar means creation. Creation never stops. It's a continuous process. Yeah? Aakar means continuous creation. So we have words like this that we're familiar with, which end with Kar. The word that we use for victory is Jai. If you add Kar to the end of it, it becomes Jaikar. Jaikar means continuous victory. That's where the word Jakara comes from. Jakara means to continuously sing of victory. We're always victorious. We never lose. Yeah? No matter what, as soon as you say a Jakara, we've won. Yeah? Jaikar. Jai means victory. Kar means forever. We're never going to lose. So Kar, always added to the end of a word, means continuous victory. Continuation of whatever that word means. So now we understand Ik, we understand O and Onkar. Ik Oankaar. And that's just the spelling, yeah? We haven't gone into the meaning yet. But it's interesting to know how deep a simple phrase like that we see and we take for granted all the time. What do all the different constituents of that word mean? Where do they come from? We talked briefly about the Islamic tradition of Ik. In the Islamic tradition, the first letter of their alphabet is a straight line. That letter in Arabic is called Alif. It's where the word alphabet comes from, Alif. Yeah? So when we hear this story, when Guru Nanak Dev Ji was young, Guruji was sent to learn all the languages. He learned the Hindu languages, but he also learned Arabic as well. At his first lesson, he sits down with his Arabic teacher, and the Arabic teacher says, right, this is the first letter of our alphabet. Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, what does that letter mean? And we've heard this story before. where the teacher isn't able to describe in any way that satisfies Guru Nanak. Guru Nanak turns around and says that Aleph means one. And he's explaining to the teacher what the meaning of this oneness is. And the teacher sends him back to his father and says, I can't teach him anything more. There's nothing more that I can teach him. So this ik concept has always been there. Yeah? The Guru Nanak Dev Ji borrows from different traditions, different understandings at the time to give a complete definition, not for the sake of borrowing, but to complete the definition. So that's ik. So let's go into Onkar. The word Onkar is not exclusive to Sikhi. Again, something we like to be quite romantic about, that yeah, Sikhi is great, it's all fantastic, it's all brand new, the Gurus came and nobody had ever heard anything like that before. When you start looking into some of the history, you realize that actually what we've done is we've lost the tradition of where these words come from, and by doing that we lose what the original meaning of some of these words are. What did the people understand by the meaning of the word Onkar? What did the people at the time understand the meaning of ik was? Yeah, why did Guru choose these words? How do we know that Onkar isn't exclusive to Sikhi? In Guru Granth Sahib Ji, Kabir Ji uses Onkar in his Bani. Kabir Ji was a contemporary of Guru Nanak, but is about 50 years older than Guru Nanak. So when Guru Nanak Dev Ji was born, Kabir Ji was already about 50 years old. And Kabir Ji is using the word Onkar. So this proves that Onkar isn't a Sikh made-up word. Yeah? Kabir Ji says, Onkar aad mein jana, lik ar meta tahe na mana. Kabir Ji's Bani. I only recognize that Onkar. Onkar aad mein jana. That primal being, that primal Onkar, that's the only one that I worship. That's the only one I recognize. Lik ar meta tahe na mana. Anyone whose life story can be written, who can be born and be destroyed, I don't accept them. So Kabir Ji is talking about worshipping temporary gods and demigods and Devi Devte like that. I do not accept anyone whose story can be written and destroyed. Yeah, whose life story can say that this is when they were born and this is when they died. Anything like that we don't worship, and that theme continues throughout Bani. Yeah, even Guru Gobind Singh Ji and throughout the Ratname, they say, do not worship anyone that can be created and destroyed. Yeah, we only worship that which sits behind that. So Onkar is something that Kabir Ji uses. The Hindu symbol that we're all familiar with, we've all seen. What sound does this make? Om. Yeah? The name of this symbol is called Onkar. What do I mean by that? Let's take something that's a little bit easier to understand. In English, that letter is got a name. The name of the letter is H, but that's not the sound that it makes. The sound that it makes is H. So one letter has a name and a sound. In the same way, when we talk about this being Om, Om is the sound, Onkar is the name of this symbol. The meaning of this word, Om, is where we get this idea of there is one God, He is creator, sustainer and destroyer. We've heard about that? Yeah? That within the Hindu tradition is known as the Trinity. There's no secret here that there is a three within this symbol. Yeah? There's a reason why there's a three within this symbol, because even in the Indian languages, the three is spelt in the same way that we have the number three. And within Om is where the concept comes from, creator, sustainer, destroyer. So Om is talking about this one thing that is creator, sustainer, destroyer. So it's just for us to understand that when we talk about there is one God, He is creator, sustainer, destroyer, it's really important for us to know where these things have come from. Yeah? I have no interest in promoting these things. Yeah, I'm not promoting this. I'm just literally just giving you some of the context. Because at least we can have an educated conversation with someone from other traditions then. If we say Onkar, that's completely new to us, and they say, no, you're not. That's ours. We use that.
So is it 3 in 1 as well?
Yes. So what they talk about, they talk about the world is divided. Well, they talk about the world is divided up into 3. Everything, and we also talk about the Tregun, the 3 gun, Rajotamo, Satogun. Yeah. So everything has 3 qualities. Everything has a creation element, a sustenance element, and a destruction element to it. So what they're doing is they're kind of saying that the world is broken into everything can be broken into 3s, and what sits behind it is almost this collective one Om that's kind of controlling all of it. Yeah, but Guru Nanak Dev Ji clarifies this idea even further. He doesn't just take the Om; he puts a ik in front of it that says actually the 3 is irrelevant. Yeah. And this is where the difference comes as well. It's important for me to tell you that there are similarities in where things have come from. But Guru Nanak Dev Ji doesn't take this concept, Om, and just put ik in front of it, because he's not interested in this concept. Because within this concept, there's a trinity. Guru Nanak Dev Ji scraps this idea and says, I accept certain elements of it, but in reality, this is the true nature of Waheguru. So he's completing the definition again. So in Hindi, in the Hinduism tradition, the Onkar and the 1, 2, 3, the Trinity, the way that they refer to it is called Trimurti, the 3 forms: creator, sustainer, destroyer, Trimurti. So that's all to do with the spelling. We still haven't gone into the meaning yet. Yeah. So let's quickly go into what does Ong mean. So let's take the ik out of it. What does Ong on its own mean? The Ong, in all of the respected translations, have all said that Ong and Om are the same thing.
If you enjoy learning spiritual teachings and you're looking to deepen your understanding, the most effective way is to learn with a group of friends. Right now, you can set up your very own Nanak Naam meetup group from the comfort of your own homes. Gather your friends, family members or colleagues and start your very own wisdom group by visiting livingwithwisdom.org. There, you'll find a range of Nanak Naam courses designed specifically for groups that you can watch together and discuss. A growing number of people have already started their very own wisdom groups, and it's having a huge positive impact on their lives. Find out how easy it is to start your own wisdom group by visiting livingwithwisdom.org.
So Om from the Hindu tradition is not completely alien to the Oankaar that we have. Yeah? And what that talks about is the creator, sustainer, destroyer. But that's why for us that's not a complete definition. Ik in front of it just clarifies the position that ik, the oneness, is the most important thing. Yeah? So he's not refuting that the world can be broken up into 3 parts and everything has a creation element, a sustenance, and a destruction element. He's not refuting that. He's saying don't get lost in that. If you get lost in that, you're in this duality. So ik is the most important concept. And in Gurbani, we also use this Ong in its own right as well. In Jap Sahib, Guru Gobind Singh Ji says, Ong Aad Rupe Anad Sarupe. Ong Aad Rupe Anad Sarupe. The Ong is the primal form, the first form. Anad Sarupe. So everything else comes out of that. All other Sarups comes from that. Yeah? So even in Gurbani, we're using Ong in its own right. Ong Adarupe. So we talked about Ik being Ekankar. Ekankar is the formless. Oankar is now beginning to describe how from the formless, form gets created. So there is an element of creation, creativity that's tied into this word Onkar. So Onkar means manifestation. So Ong is this primal energy, this primal sound. Yeah? And you'll hear about people talking about vibration, energy, sound. When you ask anyone about the meaning of Om, the Hindu symbol Om, they all say that At the root of all creation is vibration. Yeah, science will confirm the same thing. Vibration, everything vibrates. All physical matter is really just vibration on different levels. Yeah, water vibrates at a different level, gases vibrate at a different level, solids at a different level. But ultimately, everything that exists is vibration, is energy of some sort. So Oankaar is taking from a completely nirgun form of God, a formless God, actually starting to create form. So by saying Ik Onkar, what we're basically saying is all creation is formed out of God, out of Ik. So that's why for us, creation and the creator are never separate. It's like the creator breathing out. And that's what Oankaar is beginning to describe, that there is creation coming out of the formless. From the formless, form is being created. Yeah? So the Ik is never separate from creation. This is where we go into the monotheism that we talked about before. We can never be monotheistic because monotheism implies that the creator is separate from the creation. Ik Onkar clarifies that from Ik, Onkar comes out of it. Yeah, it is an extension of Ik. It's never a separate, it's not that the Ik decided to create the world and said, off you go. So Oang is vibration, sound, energy. It's the very beginning of Ik. If Ik needed to create anything in the first place, it creates the energy. From that energy, from that vibration, all of creation gets created. So Oankar is at the root of all creation. Yeah, Oankar is what all creation comes from. There's a really useful text for you guys to get familiar with, and that's a book called the Mahan Kosh. Yeah, unfortunately, it's only in Punjabi. But once you start getting a little bit familiar, actually, you can start reading that it's quite sort of everyday language Punjabi. So Mahan Kosh, written by someone called Khan Singh Nabha. Kosh means dictionary. Mahan means great dictionary. Mahan Kosh. And that is a book which has every single word of Guru Granth Sahib in alphabetical order, where you can go and look up the meaning of every single word. And in lots of places where the word has history associated with it, it also gives you the history of those words. So in the Mahan Kosh, it says Oankar is the physical manifestation of the non-physical. From nothingness, somethingness occurs. Yeah? From nothing, from Nirgun, from Ekankar to Sargun, to sound, to vibration, to energy. So you have to almost imagine, and this is where we have to start almost bringing that human characteristic back into this oneness. Imagine the oneness sitting in silence, in emptiness, in nothingness. At one point, the oneness just utters and begins to open its mouth to make a sound. That sound that comes out of it is Oang. Yes, so Oang is the sound coming out of Ik. If Ik wanted to make a sound, the sound that comes out is Oang. And by making that sound, all planets, universes, galaxies, stars start coming out of it, start being created. But even those galaxies and stars and planets are it itself. It's not creating it and just shooting it out like it's somewhere different from it. Out of itself, it's creating itself. And this is where now we can start seeing that actually there's so much depth within Gurbani. That when we say, Ik Onkar, there is one God, we haven't even scratched the surface. We don't even begin to describe what this Ik Onkar is actually talking about. So, Guru Gobind Singh Ji talks about this. He uses the word Onkar in the Bachittar Natak, in the Dasam Granth. And he is describing the beginning of creation. Guru Gobind Singh Ji says, Pratham Kal Jab Kara Pasara Oankar Te Srisht Upara. When the Pratham Kal, the primal being, Jab Kara Pasara, when he wanted to create, when he wanted to just create lots of variation, Oankar Te Srisht Upara, he uttered Oankar and all of creation came out of that. Yeah? So these aren't just my definitions that I'm making up here. Guru Gobind Singh Ji Kavi Santokh Singh Ji, Bhai Gurdas Ji, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, they're all talking about the same concept, that there is this oneness that's formless, ik, and from that there was a desire to create. And from that, Oankaar was the initial sound that was created. So the whole universe is actually Oankaar manifested into different things. Yeah? The universe is the manifestation of Oankaar. Another way to look at Oankaar is that if Oankaar is the beginning of all creation, then Ik Oankaar is also the beginning of all Gurbani. That from Ik Oankaar, if you think about Ik Oankaar, it's almost as if a sound, from there all of Gurbani is coming out. And when you want to understand Gurbani, you have to go back to Ik Oankaar to understand that Ik Oankaar is what the rest of Gurbani is actually talking about. So think of Gurbani as an utterance, as just sound coming out, but Oankaar is what it's talking about. Ik Oankaar is everything that Guru Granth Sahib is talking about is actually just talking about Ik Oankaar. Anything after that is just Gurbani trying to explain what Ik Oankaar is. That's all it is. So the whole of creation comes from Ik Oankaar, and the whole of Gurbani comes from Ik Oankaar as well. And again, if you see at the beginning of all major sections in Guru Granth Sahib Ji, they all begin with Mool Mantar. Every time Guru Granth Sahib Ji, is broken up into different rags. Every time the rag changes, the whole of the Mool Mantar is written again. Every time an author changes, it starts Ik Oankaar Satguru Prasad. Why? Because every time something changes, the Guru is saying, but don't forget, nothing's changed. We're still talking about this. Yeah? Every time something changes in Guru Granth Sahib, there's a reminder saying, but we're not talking about something new. Just because the author has changed, just because now it's the Bhaktan di Bani, not Guru di Bani, they're not talking about something different. Guruji always writes the Mool Mantar. And this tradition was there before. In the Veds and the Purans and the Hindu scriptures, they begin all scripture by putting Om in front of it, saying that we are talking about this thing. We're not talking about anything else. So Guruji also uses that tradition. Yeah? The beginning of everything is always talking about Ik Oankaar. It just goes to show how central a concept this is. The whole of Gurbani, the whole of Gurmat thinking exists within Ik Oankaar. So Oankaar is the origin of the universe. The very beginning. What the universe is made of, it's made of Oankaar. But I've used a lot of words here, and almost every word that I've used to describe Oankaar is technically incorrect. Now let me tell you why. In order to make a sound, what do you need? If I were to clap my hands together, I couldn't do it with just one hand. In order to make any sound, you have to have two things. Two things have to collide in order to make sound. Yeah? Whether you're striking a drum, a bow, striking the strings, a stringed instrument, whether you're blowing to make a flute alive, there's the person, there's the wind, and there's the instrument. There has to be at least two things to make a sound. So this is why Oankaar cannot be defined as a sound. Because when it comes from Ik, there are no two things there to make the sound of Oankaar. So Ik Oankaar comes from no sound. So it's not technically accurate to call it a sound, because there are no two things to make that sound. Because Guru Nanak Dev Ji said that there's only oneness. So even though we might describe Oankaar as sound, it's technically incorrect to call it sound. Does that make sense? You can't call it sound. You can't call it sound energy, because in order to make sound, you have to have two things. And Ik clarifies that there are no two things to make the sound. So Oankaar is almost just the sound coming out of Ik. It's the creation energy coming out of Ik. In the same way, Oankaar, it's not fair to call it a word. Oankaar isn't a word, it's the utterance of the oneness. It's the oneness trying to make a sound. It's the oneness moving out from its nirgun sarup, from its closed singularity, emptiness sarup, it creates. It comes and creates life. So this is where it becomes so difficult that you can't actually describe what Onkar is, because every description you use is incorrect. So Oankar is the root of everything. It doesn't have any root of its own. It doesn't have something that's creating Onkar. Onkar is the root of all creation. So when you break everything down right into its original source, what you're left with is Onkar. Behind everything, the root of everything is Onkar, this resonance. And this is why within our meditation, we try and go back into the root of ourself. We start with sound, but we don't get lost in the sound. Sound goes in deeper, then we internalize. And from the internal, we go even deeper. So the one searching, the one trying to internalize, we even lose that one. And what you're left with at the root of everything, when all attachments, when all delusions, when all self-description of yourself are gone, what you're left with is Onkar. Yeah? So there's a very clear synergy between practice of Naam Simran and the theory of Gurbani. Because we can talk about the whole universe is created, it comes out of ik, it comes out of sound, Oankar is the root of everything, but that doesn't mean anything to all of us. But when you sit and you meditate and you almost, in IT we call this reverse engineering. If you have something and you're trying to go back to what did it look like at the beginning? You're reverse engineering, you're not creating, you're going backwards, you're going back and back and back a step. When we're doing Naam Simran, we're reverse engineering ourselves. Because I understand myself to be me, the guy in the mirror, I have a body, I am man, I am a father, I'm this. These are all external labels. When we go into mantar, we lose those labels. And then we lose the mantar. And then we lose the one doing the mantar. So that in the end, all that's left is that there's somethingness, and that somethingness is you. So it's reverse engineering, going back and back and back, and what you're left with is Onkar. So this is why I said last time, why is this called the Mool Mantar? Because not only is it a definition of the universe, but it's a definition of you. Onkar is what you are at the very root of yourself. Inside you, you start from Onkar. That's where you come from. That's what you are. Everything else is just the fruit on the tree, but this is at the root of the tree, you are Onkar. So you are Onkar. Onkar is never Mr. God. It's never some guy over there. Yeah? It's never something far away that we're trying to reach. At the very root of you. Look, if we say that Onkar is the root of all creation, then by definition, Onkar is the root of you. If you want to find Onkar, you can't go and sit in a forest somewhere. You just go sit within your own cave. Go within yourself, and then you will find Onkar. So it is not a sound, it is not a word, it is not a vibration, it's just the root of everything.
Have you found that spiritual teachings are great to learn, but not always easy to apply to your own life? Sometimes we all need a bit of support and guidance from people who know what we're going through and can help us find some answers. The Nanak Naam Facebook group helps you do just that. It's an online community where you can ask any questions about life and get answers from other members of the group. Search for Nanak Naam Community Support and join our free Facebook group today.
Yeah? Bani tries to talk about this when it talks about Nad. Nad means vibration, but Bani says Anhad Nad, the vibration that makes no sound. The vibration that doesn't really vibrate. Anhad Nad. Had is like the sound. Anhad means the no sound sound. Anhad Nad. The sound that has no sound. Yeah? Very, very deep concepts Gurbani goes into. What's really important here, we can talk about the theory, but what's really important to take away is Onkar, Onkar is the root of you. So Onkar should never be seen as something external. So if you want to connect with it, you've got to go within yourself, because that's where you come from. That's what you're made of. Yeah? You need to know what you're made of. And this is why we use, if it's kind of something that is sound, This is why now we begin to understand why do we use sound as our technique. Our technique is based on sound. Shabad, Bani, Mantar. Yeah? This is the technique. This is the path of sound. Using sound as the tool. Why? Because the origin of the universe is kind of sound-like. So we begin with sound, and then we go deeper and deeper and deeper, and we realize that actually even the sound is temporary. Underneath it all is an experience, a vibration. Yeah? So we're using sound energy to connect with that which is what we're made of. There's a Shabad, we talked about this before, where Guru Nanak Dev Ji calls the whole Shabad Onkar. Yeah? Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as Dakhani Onkar. You might have come across a Shabad where people talk about Dakhani Onkar. That's technically an incorrect name of this Shabad. Yeah? The name of the Shabad is Onkar. Dakhani means south. Yeah? The south. So, people who call this Shabad Dakhani Onkar say it's when Guru Nanak Dev Ji went to the south of India and he recited the Shabad. But actually Dakhan is the attribute to do with the rag. It's actually the southern way of singing this rag. So it's Ramkali Mahla Pahla Dakhani. So Ramkali Dakhani. And there are other rags that also have Dakhani attached to it. So Dakhani Onkar is the incorrect use of that title of this Shabad. The name of the Shabad is Onkar. Ramkali Mahla Pahla Dakhani means Ramkali Dakhani. We're going to sing the Shabad in the southern way of singing Ramkali Rag. Yeah? But in the Shabad, Guru Nanak Dev Ji starts, Ik Onkar Satgur Prasad. Onkar Brahma Utpat. This is where Guru Nanak Dev Ji is telling everyone what is the meaning of Onkar. Onkar Brahma Utpat. From Onkar, Brahma was created. Who is Brahma? Brahma is the creator God. Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, but the creator God, the one that you worship, he was created by Onkar. Onkar Kiya Jin Chit, and Brahma was meditating on Onkar. This is where Guru Nanak Dev Ji just completely annihilates this concept that we have to worship Devi Devte. Yeah? Demigods. Guru Nanak Dev Ji is saying, you know the one that you worship? I worship the one that he was worshipping. The one that created Brahma, that's the one that is the true thing to worship. Onkar Brahma Utpat. Onkar created your creator. Yeah? Brahma, the creation God. Onkar Kiya Jin Chit. And that creator God had within his consciousness, he meditated on Onkar. Onkar Sail Jug Paye. From Onkar, all the mountains and all of time was created. Onkar Ved Nirmaye. From Onkar, all spiritual knowledge comes out of. Yeah? So we've talked about this. Onkar is the root of all physical creation, but it's the root of all spiritual knowledge as well. Yeah? Onkar Ved Nirmaye. From Onkar, all spiritual knowledge, the Vedas were created out of that. Onkar Shabad Udare. Through this Shabad of Onkar, one will be saved. So don't focus on the words. Don't focus on getting lost in I belong to this tradition and that tradition. Don't focus on a certain practice. I only practice this, or I only do this is my spiritual practice. Yeah, I only worship this God and I don't worship this God. Guru Nanak Dev Ji is saying Onkar, which is the root of everything. If you focus on the Shabad, the sound of Onkar, this is what we did at the beginning. The sound, the Shabad, through this one will be saved. You will be saved because you are going right to the root of everything. Onkar Gurmukh Tare. Onkar is the Guru's instruction. The Gurmukh, the Guru's instruction. And through that Guru's instruction of following Onkar, you will swim across. Onam Akhar Suno Bichar. Here, Guruji is using Onam, which means Ong Namo. Onam. Ong Namo. That when you surrender to that primal Ong, yeah? Onam Akhar Suno Bichar. Listen to this sound, listen to the meaning of the sound, contemplate, do vichar on the Shabad. Ong Akhar Suno Bichar. Reflect on the meaning of this Ong. Onam Akhar Tripavan Sar. From the Om, From this Onam, the three worlds are the essence of the three worlds is this Om. So this Trimurti, Guru Nanak Dev Ji gets rid of this Trimurti as well. He says, don't get lost in the three, the creator, sustainer, destroyer, which is in the Om symbol. Onam Akar Tripavan Sar. The essence of those three is Om, is that oneness. Sun Pandey kya likho janjala. Oh scholars, why are you debating? Why are you writing about debates and having these long debates? Likh Ram Naam Gurmukh Gopala. You should follow this Guru's advice, and if you want to write something down, if you want to debate, if you want to argue, make the argument of Naam. Debate Naam, discuss Naam, contemplate on Naam. Yeah, Ram Naam. So this Naam and Onkar are actually the same thing. Yeah, Naam Simran and Onkar is the same thing. Om, Ik Onkar. So we've talked about the meaning of Ik. We've talked about the meaning of Onkar. We've talked about why Guru Nanak Dev Ji brings these two concepts together. Yeah. So what Guru Nanak Dev Ji is doing, he's saying, yes, there is Om. Yes, I accept this meaning of Om, but you've lost the true meaning. By doing Om and by debating about this Tripavan, about these three worlds, this Trimurti, about the creator, sustainer, destroyer, by focusing on I'm a Brahma follower or I'm a Shiva follower, he says you've lost your way. So Guru Nanak Dev Ji brings the best bits of the Islamic tradition, yeah, the truth of that tradition, and he brings the truth of this tradition and says this is the complete definition, Ik Onkar. Yeah, so he doesn't negate either of them, he brings both of them together. So he's basically saying that in Ik, if you're only focusing on the Ik, if you're monotheistic, he says you've lost your way. If you're pantheistic, you've lost your way. Ik Onkar is this complete definition. So he's not negating anyone. This is why Guru Nanak Dev Ji is called the Guruan da Guru, yeah, the Piran da Pir, the Fakiran da Fakir. Wherever they went, they said, yeah, he's talking about our religion. He went to the Gurus, to the Hindus, and the Hindus said, yeah, he's explaining to us how to be a Hindu. He goes to the Musliman, and the Musliman say, yeah, he's telling us how to be a true Muslim. And in Guru Granth Sahib Ji, there's full shabads that explain how do you become a Pandit. What is the true meaning of Pandit? What's the true meaning of Qazi? If you want to be a Muslim, this is how you be a true Muslim. Because he's never negating anyone. He's not saying, Islam, you're wrong, Hinduism, you're wrong, I'm going to create something new. He's saying, let me tell you what your Shabad is really talking about. Let me tell you what your Bani is really talking about. This is why Guru Nanak Dev Ji cannot be seen. Sikhi is not equivalent to any of these other traditions. Sikhi is the umbrella because it's the complete definition. It's Dharam. It's the full, all-encompassing definition of what Dharam, of what spirituality is. Yeah? We don't do Sikhi any justice by saying, okay, there's Hinduism, there's Islam, and then there's one of us. Yeah, you just pick and choose whichever one you want. Sikhi is this umbrella definition that says, right, the whole world can be explained within Sikhi. Yeah? That's not just me blowing Guru Nanak Dev Ji's trumpet, yeah? This here, when you start looking into the depth of it, you will see why was Guru Nanak Dev Ji so widely accepted. Yeah? If you go to Nepal and the northern regions, they call him Rinpoche Nanak, Lama Nanak. They call him Lama because he is an incarnation of Buddhist philosophy as well. So everywhere Guru Nanak Dev Ji went, they said, yeah, he's one of us. Yeah? This is why you get people debating Guru Nanak Dev Ji was a Muslim. Yeah, he was. To you, he was a Muslim. To you, he was a Hindu. To us, he's a Sikh. Because he was all of those things. We don't own Guru Nanak. We don't have the monopoly on Guru Nanak. Guru Nanak Dev Ji is Jagat Guru. The Guru that belongs to the whole of the world, the whole of creation.
Answer the following questions either by writing them down or discussing them in your groups. How can we change our minds from believing in God to seeing it all around us? Are there any differences that you see between the Creator and the creation? What does it mean to merge with oneness, and what makes you feel separate from this oneness? How does your understanding change how you interact with others and your environment?